in Smallland. All right, so for those of you who don't know, this gentleman is Mr. Larry Hosken, and he's going to talk about the Hill Hunt Bang and the application of lessons that he's learned in previous GC summits just like this one. So it's all coming around full circle here with Larry. Take it away.
Howdy, yeah. And by the time I'm done, you should probably be thinking, yeah, these GC summits are awesome, and I should attend one. Oh, yeah, preaching to the, oh, darn, I always mess that up. All right, so, no, what am I talking about, really? What is all this? Hi. Brent, you already introduced me, jerk. I've done some of this puzzle hunt stuff. Next slide. All right. What is the GC Summit? For those of you who aren't here but are maybe seeing this in some kind of video, or I don't know, you got tricked into it. Back in my day we had Rickrolling, but in the future, who knows? It's a bunch of people who have run puzzle hunts talking about things they did that worked, things they did that maybe didn't work so well, talking about general theoretical things like, I don't know, 3-act structure, often with a lively Q&A. And what do you know, it's a great place to, rip off ideas for any events that you might be planning to run in the future. Speaking of events, what's the Bay Area Night Game? Bay Area Night Game, or BANG, is something that happens in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a puzzle hunt. Started out, there was one many years ago, like back in the 2000s, back before we had tens after them. And then the people who won that got pressured into running the next one, and since then there's been a few of them. Each one of them tends to be, the scale is about a neighborhood. You're walking around. You get about 6 puzzles. Each one of them should take you about a half hour to solve. Traditionally, there's some kind of a physical activity. Maybe you got a bunch of cards and you got to toss them into a hat. Physical activity on a level that a puzzle enthusiast can handle. Probably not doing the long jump. Right. Each one works out to be about 4 hours. 4 hours. Another interesting duration thing. The Bay Area Night Game was dormant for about 3 years. People have been like, yeah, that was totally fun. There was that cool one with all the lights late at night, and it was amazing, very high tech. Man, we're never going to be able to top that. There were some very cool bangs, and then for 3 years you would go to the Bay Area Night Game wiki, look at the front page, and then it would be like, okay, we're announcing that, say, Bang 27 is coming out. We're working on it really hard. And they're like, oh, when did they make that announcement? Back in 2010. And it was kind of a badge of shame. You would feel bad going to the wiki. I noticed that since then, someone's actually gone back to the wiki and marked a lot of those announcements as past due. So, yeah. So it would be really nice, people were saying, it would be really nice if someone were to run a bang. Then you'd have a lot of conversations where people would say, yeah, it would be great if someone ran a bang. And then everyone kind of looked at each other. Oh. Yeah. All right, so some of us goofballs actually went and did something about it. We ran the Hill Hunt Bang. What was the Hill Hunt Bang? The Hill Hunt Bang was a bang set in the Telegraph Hill neighborhood. That was kind of a chancy thing to do. Someone else had already run a bang in the Telegraph Hill neighborhood. The excellent team XX Rated did something, the Get Lucky game. That was pretty awesome. We thought we could get away with running another hunt in the same neighborhood. And we kind of had to use that neighborhood because our whole gimmick was every puzzle was either going to be themed on Telegraph, on Hill, or on Telegraph Hill, or maybe 2 out of 3. So yeah, we did that. That was back in October. and a bunch of cool people worked on this. I'm going to be talking about things that I did, and you're going to walk out of this talk saying, yeah, that Larry Hosken, he did everything. All those other people did nothing. That's not true. What I'm talking about in this talk is decisions that I made that are based on things that I heard in past GC summits. I know it's been a few slides, but you remember that that's the whole point of this talk is lessons learned from past GC summits applied to a puzzle hunt. So I can look back and say, yeah, that's a GC summit talk that influenced that decision that I made, and I know that because I made that. Other people made cool decisions too. I didn't ask them why they made those decisions, except sometimes in a really ironic tone of voice while raising my eyebrow. So they did cool things. I'm not going to talk about those things. Sorry, that would be another talk. Right. All right, so past GC Summit talks. Here's one, a cool one. Jan Chong of Coed Astronomy giving a post-mortem talk on No More Secrets. Coed Astronomy, an excellent game team. They ran a weekend overnight game called No More Secrets. Jan talked about a bunch of cool things that they did, like their answer checking system, which was from back before the days of smartphones, and you actually had to call in. Those were dark days. But they actually set up their own phone system to do it. And they also, Jan talked about multiplexing or muxing, where they sent different teams on different routes so that they didn't have too many teams all show up at one spot at the same time and overwhelm things. And she talked about site scouting. Apparently, Dale Neal on Team Coed Astronomy wants you to know this is totally true. Thank you, Dale. Dale Neal, new name, yes. So Coed Astronomy really enthused about designing puzzles, not so enthused about scouting for game sites. So she talked about, oh, gee, if you put that stuff off until the last minute, sometimes you can get into trouble. So how did that influence the Hill Hunt Bang? Well, actually, in this case, before there was even the idea for the Hill Hunt, it was me walking around on Telegraph Hill and noticing there's a bunch of stuff here that's like related to the history of communication, and it's all telegraphy, and it's on Telegraph Hill, and whoa, this could be a puzzle hunt. Yeah. So in this case, totally did not procrastinate on site scouting. In fact, scouted for sites before there was even the idea for a puzzle hunt. But yeah, who knew that they would put a Marconi Memorial Bench up on Telegraph Hill? You'd think that would be down more in the North Beach Italian, we love all things Italian neighborhood. But no, it's up on the hill. Even though, as we found out when designing that hunt, and perhaps you found out while playing it, the telegraph of Telegraph Hill was not the electric kind. Weird. All right, another talk. Let's see. Right, this was Linda Holman. Who's here? Oh, yeah, she's here. Hi. Don't feel embarrassed. I'm just going to make fun of you. Talking about game logistics, then and now. The Shintecky folks have been running puzzle hunts for years, like back even before there was Shintecky. It was just a bunch of nerds hanging out in the Stanford dorms. And it turns out that back in the early days, you didn't really go out and choose game sites to fit your game. It's just, oh, you're going to run one of those puzzle hunt things. Well, of course you're going to go to the Pulgus Water Temple, because why wouldn't you? Everyone goes to the Pulgus Water Temple. But then some people came up with this weird idea that maybe you should like have different sites so that people weren't going to the exact same sites every time. But this meant that you got into this bad, just terrible situation where you would actually have to figure out what those sites would have to be. So Linda talked about doing site scouting, going around, looking at things. But how do you figure out what's a good site? And she talked about, wow, comfort, integration, customization, and theming. So cool. How do you apply that? Well, when I had wandered around Telegraph Hill and found all these thematic places, it's like, wow, that was amazing. The theming is so great for this. We've got all this history of communication. We've got that one really hard stone bench. Yeah. And that hard cement planter with room for maybe one and a half teams to sit on that one planter. Yeah. And that featureless alleyway with the cool name named after the guy who designed International Morse Code. That featureless alleyway. Wait, where are people actually going to sit and solve without having their butts fall asleep from being sitting on the sidewalk all the time? Maybe we should figure out some other places where maybe there's restrooms. Some people like the restrooms. Yeah. Right. So using those criteria. Some of us wandered around the Telegraph Hill neighborhood, found some places where teams could actually stand to be for half an hour solving a puzzle without passing out. All right, another talk. John Owens, Meta Puzzles I Have Known. This was just John riffing on meta puzzles. So he talked about different kinds of meta puzzles, about how you might have a meta puzzle that is pure, where it just uses the answers of previous puzzles, and you just have to stare at them for a while until you notice, oh, wow, they've all got, I don't know, all the vowels arranged in different orders or something. Versus a shell meta, where you might take those answers that you've been getting and plug them into something new that you receive, which then allows you to do something. Which is popular for our sequential hunts, he was pointing out, because in a puzzle hunt, unlike the MIT mystery hunt, where you kind of want to be able to skip some things, in a linear puzzle hunt, you kind of want teams to have to go through everything. So you probably tend to hold some meta puzzle back until the very end. Oh, and he also pointed out that the SF minigame reused answers and methods. So that a cool thing to do is to reuse not just the answers, but the things that you use to get to those answers. Kind of tying into what Alan was talking about earlier, where you have your protagonist learn something, and then they can apply that in the final battle. Yeah. So another thing that came up during Alan's talk was that meta puzzles are kind of controversial. Is there anyone from Boston here? Oh, yeah. So people, from the MIT world, you're like, no, you've got to have meta puzzles. Meta puzzles are necessary. Of course. But on the West Coast, we're kind of like, yeah, when they work, they're great, guys. And I even added Alan's quote to this slide, which then caused Brent to scroll off the top. Oops. Okay, so at the Q&A portion of John's talk afterwards was saying, hey, it seems like some people are kind of frustrated when we use the metas. And then Dan Agnor was like, yeah, it seems like designers sometimes want to make the meta very hard. So teams at the very end of the hunt, when, as Alan's pointing out, you kind of want to be there at the exciting finale, but instead of your exciting finale, you've kind of got this slog. And what was Alan's phrasing? Grindful, soul-crushing. Yes. So John Owens was then saying, yeah, actually, if I could redesign my game, I would make the meta easier, because we had people, gamers are kind of tired at the end of a puzzle hunt. If you then face them with the toughest puzzle that they've seen all day, they're kind of like, yeah, we've had plenty. We're not in the mood for this. So this then brings up a meta that we ended up not using for this hunt. Right, so if you played in this game, you know that Telegraph Hill had its own telegraph code. Telegraph Hill had a telegraph code where you kind of positioned arms on a visual semaphore. For those of you who are looking at the slides instead of looking at me, congratulations, that's great, but you don't get to see me making arm gestures as I try to simulate a stick. Yeah, never mind. So you got to encounter Telegraph Hill's telegraph code. And you're like, telegraph, telegraph. Yeah, that all fits. That's so thematic. What you don't know is that there's such a thing as a Hill cipher. Oh, yeah, the Hill cipher. Oh, my gosh, that would have been the best, most thematic meta ever. Have combined Telegraph Hill's own telegraph code with the Hill cipher. So what is the Hill cipher? Well... It's this cool thing where teams get this encoded message, it looks like nonsense, and they figure out a key which has got 4 letters or 9 letters. It's got a number of letters that's a square number, and they make that into a square matrix. And then they do a lot of matrix math where they're like adding and multiplying and applying the modulo transformation. Yeah, it's great. In fact, it sounded kind of familiar. A few years back, there was this game, the 420 game, themed on the Matrix movie. And very thematically, teams over the course of the game would get these sticks with writing on them. And then eventually they'd figure out, oh yeah, these sticks are a code. And you can use that code to figure out some numbers. And it turns out that these sticks, when arranged in the proper way, form a numerical matrix. So then, as the meta puzzle, you get to solve this matrix. You get to do a lot of matrix math. And some teams were into that. Actually, a lot of into that. It probably kind of helped that this was a weekend game, which tends to attract a bunch of people who are like, yeah, we're in it for the long haul. But even then, there were some teams who were like, whoa, yeah, I don't know about that. That at the end, some of us like to sleep, you know? So I figured, you know, actually, for something the scale of a bang, you know, a nice, friendly afternoon game, people aren't necessarily so intense about doing the tough math or whatever. Yeah. Maybe there would be better choices of meta puzzles. All right. Speaking of Boston people, now that I've been making fun of them, I don't think Erin's here though. Okay, she won't throw rocks at me. Cool. But she gave a talk. Let's see. It was about the MIT Mystery Hunt. Actually, it wasn't exactly a talk. It was basically her group had just run the MIT Mystery Hunt that year, and she had done like a really great job, such a great job that she kind of got like pulled out of the audience and forced. Can I say forced? Anyhow, she got pressured into doing a Q&A. Anyone here done anything awesome lately? Because we might be pulling. No, it's not true. We're probably running long, or at least I probably am. Anyhow, so basically people threw questions at her. Right. And Weiwa asked a question where he's like, you know, it seems like a lot of the mystery hunts lately have been doing all this wacky stuff, and it's... People who are reading the slides started laughing. They've been doing all this wacky stuff. This puzzle hunt seems like it just kind of worked really well. It's really robust. And Erin talked about, I had this design goal, and that was that our weekend-long game should not run until Monday. So that's an important principle. You got to be thinking about what to put in, but you also got to be thinking, wait, what's the scale of what we're aiming for? Maybe we should leave out some stuff. And this, for the meta puzzle that we actually ended up using, this came up again. So Bang tends to run about 4 hours. There's some variation there. You might say, 4 hours? You keep saying 4 hours. Wait, that event, that turned out to be closer to 6 hours. And you'd be right. And you might also say, so that meta puzzle that we ended up dealing with, okay, so that was like we had solved 9 puzzles, and then we received this grid to fill in, this 3x3 grid to fill in with our 9 answers. It didn't take very long to fill in that grid. It seemed kind of like once you actually figured out what to do, you were like, oh, well, this small little grid, we could just go, okay, and we're done. So the first draft of that grid, was like 3x5. There was a bit more challenge. People who were playtesting that were like, maybe 4x5 or 5x5 would be better. It's like, yeah, that would be better. That would make the meta puzzle better. But we're kind of at 6 hours now. And that's with 9 puzzles. Do we really want to make this thing 1.5 times longer, maybe twice as long, to have the meta puzzle be cooler? Who looks like a dork if the meta puzzle is cool, but the overall event is so long that people are really grouchy at the end? Oh, I'll look like a dork? Okay. Meta puzzle is going to be kind of short. Sorry. Also, similar thing driving the shortest puzzle of the game. So some of you have played this. You'll be like, yeah, what was that one puzzle? The one that was like 10 minutes long? You received one puzzle that was, well, okay, for some teams it was probably like closer to 3 minutes long. But it was super short. About 10 minutes, typical Bang puzzle length, half an hour. And this was one where it would have been really easy to make longer, especially with a physical activity. Typically, Bangs have a physical activity. You should be tossing cards into a hat or throwing darts or some other hurling or skipping thing. We didn't do that. Okay, there was that one hill that you had to walk up. But we didn't time you on that because you were puzzlers, and we would worry that your competitive but maybe out-of-shape nature might cause health things. Yeah. So there wasn't a timed or measured physical activity. Would have been super easy to add one to that one short puzzle, but, once we're up to 6 hours, not really looking to make the event any longer. So, yeah. Remember the scale. Remember what you're aiming for, and leave things out. Right. Ian Tullis. Great talk. Advice from and for a puzzle snob. Ian is a great puzzle constructor. He constructs these puzzles that are amazingly impossible, that match these constraints where you're like, yeah, I guess this could be ternary code that's controlling how this clown is juggling some balls, but there's no way that you could construct a puzzle answer that would fit that, so you shouldn't even consider that. And then it turns out that's what he did. But he talked about this tension that exists between constructing amazing puzzles and constructing fun puzzles. And he says, well, sometimes you've got this idea that's really amazing, but you can't use it. And when he talked about leaving out puzzles, he had this really sad metaphor where he talks about how he likes observing this family of quail, and he'll see, oh, look, they've got baby quail. And then a week later, they've got a lot fewer baby quail. And he's like, well, okay, you miss those little baby quail, but it's really part of nature's plan that some of them have to go away. So, yeah, I wrote 30 puzzles for this thing, of which we ended up using 3. And most of them were just wildly inappropriate. Too long, too short, too much something where you kind of have to sit down and research something and learn a lot about it just so that you can then grind through this thing. Things where you say, what is this, the MIT Mystery Hunt? Right. So I'm glad that I wrote those, so we got to say, all right, these 3, if they're the ones that are most appropriate, they're probably pretty darn good. But yeah, I had to leave a lot out. Rich Bragg, Clue Keeper, made a Clue Keeper announcement. His talk was not planned. He got pulled out of the audience. Or I think he just wanted to make an announcement, and then someone went and recorded it. Yes. Yes, people are cruel at this event. I'm still waiting to see who they pull out of the audience to give a surprise talk this year. I'm kidding. I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to make it happen myself. Um, right. So, who here's used Clue Keeper? Yeah, okay, I see. Not all hands going up. Cool, but most. It's this cool app for puzzle hunts where teams can enter, here's what I think the answer is, and Clue Keeper will say, that's right, now drive to Arizona, or whatever the next site is. Or it'll say, actually, it sounds like you're getting close, but not quite right. Or else it'd say, I have no idea, I think you're just guessing, man. It will also dispense hints. It does a lot of the interactions that GC has to do with teams. It can take care of those for you, taking the load off of GC. But it's aimed at people who are running like professional events, private events, things where organizations like Shinteki, like Raven Chase, can make actual money by going up to companies and saying, wouldn't you love to do a team building exercise by getting all of your people together to remind themselves how clever they are? And for those, Clue Keeper charges money. But what Rich was announcing was, hey, if you're a bunch of amateurs who are running some nonprofit event, then talk to us about pricing. We're not going to charge you full price. We'd rather that you were using our stuff than that you were trying to rig up your own system with, I don't know, pre-smartphone phone system calls in with multiplexing or whatever. So great, that meant that we could use Clue Keeper. And sure enough, we were able to get along with a lot fewer GC people at sites. There was one site which actually didn't have to have anyone sitting there at all, though we did have a couple of people sitting there for a while until they figured out that they didn't really have that much to do. Sorry, Curtis. Sorry, Deanne. Yeah. But Clue Keeper helped us out a lot, and we're really glad that we didn't have to pay full price. Thank you, Clue Keeper people. We very much appreciate it. Oh, but also if you're going to run an event and it's some like not for profit, whatever do-gooder thing, then yeah, talk to the Clue Keeper people. They're pretty sweet. Debbie Goldstein. Oh, maybe snuck out. Cool, let's talk about her. She gave a talk about caring for ground teams, where ground teams are people who you might think of as those site monitors or GC volunteers, those people who hang out at puzzle sites, handing out puzzles. She had noticed that at some events, people who volunteered came back saying, yay, that was fun, that was great. It was great to talk with all those puzzle nerds. And then sometimes people came back saying, oh, that was really hard. So she was wondering, well, what are some things that GC can do to make things better for those site monitors? This was a clutch talk by Debbie. Someone else had volunteered to give this talk and then dropped out, and Debbie was like, okay, I'm going to make this talk happen. She sent out a survey to people who had done this, and then basically asking, what are the things that are important to you? And then she ran a Family Feud game where people would say, oh, I think that lots of people are going to say that this is important or that is important. So what's important? Lots of people said, like, schedule, location, a puzzle walkthrough. If people ask me about the puzzle, I want to be able to say something in response. GC contact info, if things go wrong, who do I call to say, honest officer, this other person is going to have everything that you need to know. Bathrooms, lots of people asked about those, and a few people said snacks. Right. So this was helpful in that when it came time to come up with like information sheets for site volunteers, or well, some of them were volunteers, some of them were playtesters who kind of got volunteered. It's like, Oh, you didn't make it into the game. You wanna play test, huh? Well, congratulations, volunteer. Let's see. We were able to come up with an info sheet for each of them that kind of said, here's a map, here's where you're going. Also, I would hand granola bars to these people. Now, when Deb did her survey, she would get like 70 responses back saying, yes, a puzzle walkthrough, very important. And 5 people saying, oh yeah, snacks. And what I should have gotten out of that, in hindsight, I now realize, is that 65 out of 70 people did not say snacks. Because I couldn't help but notice that people kept sneaking the granola bars back into my backpack. It's like, how did I end up with more granola bars than when I started today? It was really tough to give away granola bars to site monitors. My experience might not be the same as other people's experience. This game did start in the North Beach neighborhood where there's a lot of really good deli around. So people are like looking at a granola bar and then looking at some of the local places might be like, meh, some other time maybe. And, oh man, I've obviously talked enough. Any questions? Especially ones that involve making fun of people who aren't here to defend themselves because they gave a talk a couple of years ago?
We're good? All right. Thank you, Larry. Oh, wait, hold on. Dan has a question.
Are you going to publish those awesome Giphy face text things?
I
I especially want the Jan Chong one.
All those slides are already online. So those of you who are having trouble seeing the slides, you can be like kicking yourself in hindsight saying, oh man, I really wish I had followed that link. Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Larry. Okay.